to me, what it's really about is being able to win championships and being able to have enough space in the salary cap so George can make his magic. And for me, it wasn't really about, how much necessarily. It was about how many Super Bowls we can win.
The NFL absolutely loves drama. I mean, I think all of us, human beings in general, have an element to us that just really appreciate drama, especially leading up to football season. And it seems like ESPN is definitely adding fuel to the fire because they gave us an inside look into the dysfunction behind the scenes during Russell Wilson's tenure with the Seattle Seahawks and how it resulted in him getting traded to the Denver Broncos. I'm excited about this because I remember covering this story multiple times as it was going on last offseason. I mean, I remember the Athletic article I was citing consistently. I remember his interview with Dan Patrick. So I'm excited to draw some parallels here for you guys and give you some analysis. Before we get to the content, we're doing cash giveaways on my Twitter account. All you have to do is follow me and retweet the tweet in front of you. We're going to announce winners every single weekend. And now that we got all that out of the way, break! Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? This article is very dense and very long, and it's actually pretty exciting because there's a lot of stuff in here that I actually think is rehashed and consistent with stuff that we've reported on in the past. So it's a remarkable article. I'm going to leave it in the description down below. If I forget to do it, let me know in the comment section because I'm very prone to doing that. But it's called Inside the Russell Wilson Seattle Seahawks Drama That Led to the Denver Broncos Trade, and it is written by Brady Henderson. So it opens up with a story that we're all very familiar with, especially if you've been rocking with this channel for a little bit. And it starts with how Russell Wilson was frustrated during Super Bowl 55, which was the Super Bowl between the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Kansas City Chiefs. Russell Wilson was actually at the game in a booth next to Roger Goodell during that time to receive his Walter Payton NFL Man of the Year award. The game was an unsettling reminder of what he wanted and what he didn't have, of where his career was after 9 seasons with the Seattle Seahawks as compared to quarterbacks on the field before him. On one side, there was Tom Brady getting hit twice all night, winning his 7th Super Bowl at the age of 45, and doing it with a collection of marquee players, several of whom the Tampa Bay Buccaneers had signed at his request. On the other side, there was Patrick Mahomes throwing 49 times in a pass-happy Kansas City Chiefs offense that had helped him win MVP. I love how they don't mention the fact that Patrick Mahomes' offensive line was absolutely decimated that game, but obviously Russell Wilson was very jealous of Tom Brady. And if you remember the offseason of 2021, I mentioned this in almost every single one of my videos that offseason. That was the offseason of quarterbacks looking at Tom Brady, being jealous of the control Tom Brady had over personnel decisions in Tampa Bay and wanting the same thing. It was the issue that Deshaun Watson had with the Houston Texans that initially resulted in him demanding a trade from the Houston Texans. If you remember, he wanted to say in who the next general manager for the Houston Texans was and who the next head coach was, but the Houston Texans inevitably just hired Nick Caserio, which resulted in Deshaun Watson tweeting some things never change and then demanding a trade because he was frustrated by the fact that the Houston Texans just consistently picked off the New England Patriots front office, first with Bill O'Brien and then with Nick Caserio. But Watson wasn't the only person that was frustrated about the fact that he wasn't involved in personnel decisions. Aaron Rodgers made a big deal about it too during the 2021 offseason. If you remember, during the NFL draft, there was a huge frenzy over the fact that Aaron Rodgers was mad at Brian Gutekunst and wanted Brian Gutekunst to be fired even. So that offseason was all about quarterbacks trying to get more control over personnel decisions. Ultimately, Deshaun Watson would get traded, and ultimately Aaron Rodgers would stay because, well, I guess they came to an understanding. But in the case of Russell Wilson, he made an even bigger deal about it. He even went on the Dan Patrick show to discuss it, and the article brings that up next. He would go on the Dan Patrick show and say, "You play the game to be the best in the world. You know what I hate? I hate sitting there watching other guys play the game, and there's nothing worse." In an interview with Patrick on a Zoom call set up to discuss his Man of the Year honor, Wilson made those frustrations public. In a 180-degree turnaround from his usual news conference puffery, he vented about pass protection and a perceived lack of say in personnel decisions relative to other elite quarterbacks. He made multiple mentions of his legacy and said the nearly 400 times he'd been sacked during his career, the most in a player's first 9 seasons since the 1970 merger.
Never want to be sacked that many times. 400 times basically is way too many. 400 too many. The big thing that we got to fix, that's got to be fixed, and has to be, at the end of the
the day, because my goal was to play, 10 to 15 more years. And so when you think about that and longevity and legacy and all that, and you watched the game the other night, the difference between that game was Tom was taking shots down the field and getting the ball, to his guys and stuff like that. But, he wasn't touched really. He got touched. I think he got sacked one time in the game.
It then says people at the heart of the Wilson Seahawks breakup, including those close to the quarterback and members of Seattle's front office, coaching staff, and players, described to ESPN how a dysfunctional situation built toward its eventual breaking point. Wilson wanted out, believing coach Pete Carroll and the organization were holding him back, and with their own misgivings about how his game was aging. The Seahawks lost faith in Wilson, just as he had lost faith in them. So according to Doug Baldwin, he said, from my vantage point, the divorce was inevitable and many years in the making. The reasons are multiple, but ultimately I think it comes down to a difference in pursuit. So I've cited this article a lot last year. It's from February of 2021. And the reason why I cited it a lot last year is because there is a huge divide in regards to what Pete Carroll wanted versus what Russell Wilson wanted. Russell Wilson just wanted to cook. He just wanted to go out there and throw the ball maybe 40 times per game. Pete Carroll had a different philosophy, and this was the philosophy that won him a Super Bowl. He built Hall of Fame credentials on what he sees as simple truths about how the game is best played. Run the ball, avoid turnovers, explode in the passing game, saying that the game is played well when you don't give the other team the football, and the game is played well when you can convert and make first downs. The game is played well when you can explode on offense. In contrast, Wilson believes that Carroll's conservative philosophy is limiting his production and by extension his ambitions to be one of the game's all-time greats. It then mentions how in the first half of the 2020 season, Seattle unleashed an all-out aerial attack, throwing the ball early and often, and this resulted in Russell Wilson being the clear frontrunner for MVP, an award that he coveted for implications it would have on his legacy. And here's where things got problematic. Russell Wilson had a game versus the Buffalo Bills where they would lose 44-34. He would turn the ball over 4 times, the defense wasn't able to keep up, and Carroll sounded shell-shocked at what he had just watched, saying, "I don't recognize that game. It's a game that I don't have any place in my brain for." It was an uncharacteristic performance from Wilson and an unacceptable one for Carroll, who dedicated a whole day of practice to turnovers. And in response, he pulled back the reins on Russell Wilson and the offense. A week later, Russell Wilson would have his worst game of the season, turning the ball over 3 more times in an ugly 23-16 loss to the Rams. Wilson appeared almost rattled, and longtime NFL writers Cherian Williams and Mike Jones both wrote that the game scuttled Wilson's MVP hopes. So this is an article that I was citing a lot during the 2021 offseason, and there's other stuff like the Seattle Seahawks firing their offensive coordinator Brian Schottenheimer, who placed a huge emphasis on throwing the football in favor for Shane Waldron, who opted for a more run-heavy attack. So back to the ESPN article, because this article goes back to 2019. So originally we thought the issue was in 2020. It seems like these issues were going all the way back to 2019, maybe even earlier, but leading up to an October 2019 game at the Atlanta Falcons, Wilson's fast start had made him one of the prime early season contenders for MVP, an award he badly wanted to win. Again, another parallel consistent with old articles that we were seeing in the past. Russell Wilson really wants to win an MVP. With the Baltimore Ravens and eventual winner Lamar Jackson on a bye, this was Wilson's chance to pull ahead. He threw 2 touchdowns as the Seahawks jumped out to a 24-0 halftime lead, but attempted only 5 passes in the second half, which, to be honest, makes a lot of sense. I mean, if you have a huge lead over a contending team, then in the second half, why would you need to throw the ball so much? I mean, wouldn't you opt for a more run-heavy attack? I mean, you shouldn't be super conservative, but obviously you're not going to throw the ball as much as you did when you didn't have a 3-touchdown lead. So this pissed off Russell Wilson. Afterwards, according to a source who spoke with the quarterback, Wilson was livid at how Carroll had taken his foot off the gas, believing it had cost him a chance to grab a hold of the MVP race. The article then brings up the 2020 season, where Wilson would find himself back in the early season MVP conversation a year later. The Seahawks went into the 2020 campaign with a plan to lean more on Wilson's arm, much to the delight of the quarterback and fans who had backed Let Russ Cook, a social media movement and catchphrase that Wilson would later trademark for charitable purposes. Going into year 9, I'm trying to break away. He wanted to join the likes of Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, Drew Brees, and Joe Montana. I want to be the best in the world to ever do this, something that was cited in the Athletic article a year ago as well. Right here, you can see it. I'm trying to break away. You know what I mean? I'm trying to chase Brady, Brees, Manning, and Montana. So lots of parallels going on here. With Carroll and coordinator Brian Schottenheimer running the offense through Wilson more than ever, he tossed 19 touchdowns to 3 interceptions during a 5-0 start to claim undisputed status as the early MVP frontrunner. I don't want to vote, alluding to the fact that he hasn't received any in his career. I think more importantly, I want to win. Obviously, MVP is a special award. award. So Russell Wilson felt like the reason why he never really had a chance was because he was operating in one of the NFL's more run-heavy systems. Since his rookie season, the Seahawks have been 29th in design pass play rate. They're 21st since 2015 when Russell Wilson signed his first mega deal. Things were going good until Russell Wilson gave away to the worst turnover funk of his career. He committed 10 turnovers over the next 4 games, and with their defense also faltering, the Seahawks went 1-3. One of Wilson's 7 interceptions in that stretch came in a loss versus the Los Angeles Rams in Week 10. Trailing by a touchdown, he scrambled to his right and had a massive swath of empty turf in front of him. He bypassed the rushing yards, uncorking a deep heave back across the field that was picked off in the end zone. What are we doing here? One source in the Seahawks front office remembers thinking at the time, are we trying to win games or are we trying to win MVP? It makes a lot of sense, man. I mean, at a specific point, you need to do whatever it takes to win the game, and if MVP comes alongside with that, then great. And as a result, like the article we were citing before, Carroll had enough of the turnovers and pulled the plug on let Russ cook and reverted to the formula that was ingrained deep within the 69-year-old coach. After dropping back to pass more than any team over the first 10 weeks, the Seahawks ranked 15th in design pass rate over the final 7. Pete Carroll would say, early on in this season, when we didn't have to run the ball much because we were rolling, throwing the football, those guys were out there and we almost took it for granted. I'm disappointed about that because that's the element of our football that makes us the style of team that we are. And it makes Russ's job different than it is when he has to throw the football 40 or 50 times. He certainly can do it and loves doing it, and we don't mind doing it, but our football is better shaped when we're balanced and we're attacking you, and we can play off of that. If it's the defense, if it's the special teams, it's the statement of the way we play. What confuses me is this would benefit Russell Wilson if anything. I mean, Aaron Rodgers has won his MVP awards and has had significantly more success recently winning the MVP once Matt LaFleur came in and installed a remarkable rushing offense in addition to Aaron Rodgers' brilliant quarterback play. I mean, last year is the greatest example of this. Tom Brady beat Aaron Rodgers in every major statistical category in regards to throwing the football, but the difference was Aaron Rodgers' touchdown to turnover ratio was significantly better than Tom Brady's. Aaron Rodgers had a rushing attack that complemented him perfectly, resulting in him winning back-to-back MVPs. So you would think in this scenario, Russell Wilson would have a better chance winning MVPs if he just decided to stay with Pete Carroll's game plan. I mean, throwing the ball less might mean, yeah, you're going to get way less passing yardage, but your likelihood for turnovers and potentially forcing the ball significantly decreases when the defense is anticipating the run. I mean, that brings in play action against stacked boxes. That makes it significantly easier for Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf to do their thing. So that's the part that confuses me. The article then mentions how they fired Brian Schottenheimer, citing philosophical differences, and hired Shane Waldron, which, wow, I'm reading this article with you guys, so the fact that I mentioned this before getting to the article is just, I'm proud of myself a little bit here. So again, this is stuff that we heard before. This is something that I personally thought was a little egregious. In the spring of 2017, Seahawks general manager John Schneider was a conspicuous attendant at Patrick Mahomes' pro day. The general manager had become so enamored with the Texas Tech quarterback that Seattle would have taken him had he had been available late in the first round. The massive gamble on an unproven quarterback would have carried an obvious benefit: flexibility to build the roster around a cheap rookie contract the way Seattle had done during Wilson's first 3 seasons when Seattle won 1 Super Bowl and nearly a second. I could get behind that philosophy. I've said it many times before. Usually the quarterbacks that win Super Bowls are on remarkably cheap contracts or on rookie scale contracts. Last year, Matthew Stafford was the 9th highest paid quarterback in the entire league, and while he got a huge pay increase this year, it was a below market contract for a quarterback, which allowed the Rams to invest their money elsewhere. Prior to that, Tom Brady famously has taken pay cuts throughout his career because, well, his supermodel wife makes significantly more money than he ever could, to be honest, which is a testament to her. Props to Giselle. But here's the thing, they didn't only go after Patrick Mahomes. A year later, John Schneider attended Josh Allen's pro day, a repeat move that raised eyebrows among observers and ruffled feathers inside Russell Wilson's camp. Why would Schneider travel to far-flung campuses to scout quarterbacks when he already had one building a Hall of Fame resume as a Super Bowl champion and perennial Pro Bowler? Wilson at the time was 29 and coming off of a season in which he led the NFL in touchdown passes with 34, which was then his career high. Schneider's explanation was the fact that he was working in the Green Bay Packers front office when Aaron Rodgers unexpectedly fell to them late in the first round in 2005. That experience plus his and Carroll's oft-cited promise to leave no stone unturned in player evaluation meant Schneider had to do his homework on quarterback prospects. Schneider's in-season schedule kept him from attending attending any of Mahomes or Allen's games, so the pro day was his chance to see them throw live. Wilson's camp had a different view. They were pissed. A Seahawks front office source said, the clearest sign of Wilson's camp that Seattle's interest in other quarterbacks was something more than due diligence. The Seahawks, according to someone in Wilson's camp and the Seahawks front office, called the Cleveland Browns before the 2008 draft to discuss a trade that would have swapped Russell Wilson for the #1 overall pick. I love when this happens. I feel like we get so many stories of this, like when the Philadelphia Eagles offered the Tampa Bay Buccaneers 3 first-round picks for the ability to get the #1 overall pick and draft Marcus Mariota. It seems like this is another example. The Cleveland Browns could have essentially traded Baker Mayfield for Russell Wilson. Browns weren't interested, but Seattle's flirtation motivated Russell Wilson's agent to secure a no-trade clause when he negotiated Wilson's 4-year, $140 million contract the following April. So the next part of the article is the fact that he was pissed off about the way that the Seattle Seahawks were trying to build a team around him. Over Wilson's first 3 seasons, while he was playing on his rookie contract, the Seahawks ranked between 4th and 9th in percentage of cap dollars spent on their offensive line. In the 7 seasons since he signed his first mega deal in 2015, they've ranked in the top 20 once and were among the bottom 5 3 times. Wilson, according to a source close to him, didn't get a clear answer from the Seahawks on how they plan to improve their offensive line, prompting him to take his frustrations public after the Super Bowl, according to team and NFL sources. Wilson's comments angered Seattle's linemen. Left tackle Dwayne Brown would later express as much to reporters. Carroll and Schneider were caught off guard, believing all was well after they had worked together to hire Shane Waldron. With the NFL world buzzing, the Seattle Seahawks made no public attempt to tamp down the story, instead letting Russell Wilson sit with the firestorm he created. In the meantime, Schneider and Rodgers began discussing potential trade destinations, and according to sources on both sides, had a heated exchange about which teams would be in play. In late February 2021, hours after The Athletic published a story detailing the Russell Wilson Seattle Seahawks rift, which again, I can't believe I dug that up before I even found out that this article brought it up, but side note, Rodgers dropped an on-the-record bombshell telling ESPN's Adam Schefter that while Wilson hadn't requested a trade, he'd waive his no-trade clause to play for 4 teams: Raiders, Saints, Cowboys, and Bears. While the trade never came to fruition, the message had been sent to the rest of the NFL. Wilson was open to playing elsewhere. Carroll, though, had no interest in letting them go. Their football differences aside, he had backed Wilson from the get-go, first making the bold decision to name him the starter as a 3rd-round rookie in 2012 over free agent addition Matt Flynn, and then sticking by Wilson amid his early season growing pains despite public criticism that Seattle was wasting a championship caliber defense. A detail in the 2017 ESPN magazine story by Seth Wickersham, the Seahawks defenders grew resentful in later years over their belief that Carroll gave Wilson preferential treatment. And now, according to a front office source, Carroll was staunchly opposed to the idea of trading his franchise quarterback, believing that he could manage the drama and Wilson's declining mobility. With final say over personnel decisions, Carroll's view was the one that mattered most, but his stance would eventually soften. He's a great pro, he's a veteran, he shows up, leader, all that stuff every single day. So yeah, it took a while. After the 2021 season, Wilson and Carroll discussed the possibility of a trade, and that's when shit got real. By this point, some within the Seattle Seahawks believed that Wilson's best days were behind him. Their concern wasn't with the finger injury that had sidelined him for 3 games in 2021, but some believed Wilson's escapability, one of the traits that made him an elite quarterback worthy of elite money, was waning. He's not as mobile as he used to be, said one source in the Seattle Seahawks front office. And one notable play from last season helped fuel that belief, which came in the Seahawks' Week 16 loss to the visiting Chicago Bears. Leading by 7 points midway through the 4th quarter, Wilson took a shotgun snap on 3rd down and had a clean pocket but no options that he liked. Wilson scrambled out of the backside with his patented spin move, but there would be no magical escape. Robert Quinn dropped him for a 13-yard sack. The ensuing longer missed field goal and defensive collapse resulted in a loss that eliminated the Seahawks from playoff contention for the 2nd time in Wilson's career. And this was a big deal at the time because Pete Carroll would come out and say that you can't take a sack there. But Wilson would defend his decision doing this, saying that he was trying to play ball like I know how to do and always do. He was trying to extend the play and hopefully score a touchdown there. The front office continues to say that I just felt like he's a descending player. Is he going to be able to be a true pocket passer at the end of his career and just stand there and drop the ball off to to his checkdowns. He's never done that. I can't tell you he's going to be able to do that. It's going to get more and more difficult for him to create and do what he used to do. I do think that's going to be harder, said former Seahawks quarterback Brock Huard. Is that going to hit in 2022? Probably not. I think this will probably be one of his best years for the Broncos. But will he slow down in 23, 24, and 25? Yes. The guys that have endured and changed the threshold and played into their 40s, Brady, Breeze, they played a different game than Russell plays. They play a game totally from the pocket and have done that the entirety of their career. That's not necessarily Russell Wilson's game. I'm seeing some Robert Griffin III parallels going on here. So those two things, which is a declining player and then what the ask was going to be the next time, which would be his third time getting a contract, is like, no, let's play really good defense. Let's run the shit out of the ball. And that's how we won a world championship. That's what we've got to keep going back to. Not everyone in the organization believed Wilson's declining. Two Seattle coaches believed that the same play from last season was a counterexample. During an October win at the San Francisco 49ers, Wilson spun out of a would-be sack, scrambled to his right, and with his feet unset, threw a rope some 30 yards in the air for a touchdown. The 4.5 speed where he's scrambling and now he's running down the field for big chunks of yards, that might not come anymore, said one Seattle coach, but the feel for pocket presence, he's always going to have that. I have no reservation in saying that Russ is going to continue to compete with his style, and then as he begins to slow down a little bit, I think he'll adjust. That's just who he is. He finds a way to win. The article then closes off by saying that the Seattle Seahawks received calls from the Broncos and several other teams, including the Saints, Giants, and the Commanders, and they knew Russell Wilson wanted Denver, but kept New Orleans involved in the bidding so the Broncos would have to compete against another offer. Snyder later apologized to the Saints and other teams who had called, having told them that they weren't trading Wilson. Denver was Wilson's only option and Snyder's preferred choice because Drew Lock was the quarterback Snyder wanted in return. Snyder met with Broncos GM George Patton at the Senior Bowl in early February and again at the scouting combine in Indianapolis a month later. At the combine, Carroll told reporters in carefully chosen wording that the team had no intention of trading Wilson, but the deal was done soon. When the trade became official a week later, the Seahawks released statements from Carroll, Schneider, and de facto team owner Jody Allen, all making a clear mention of how Wilson wanted out. Then in a news conference at team headquarters, Carroll defended his since scrutinized comment from the combine and said that a better than expected offer from Denver turned the tide. I've said a million times to you guys that I have no intention of moving on with the quarterback. I love Russell and loved having him in the program. That's the way I was committed to doing it, and I felt that way all the way throughout. To me, it's not about blaming anybody or forcing the issue in any way in particular. Everybody had to agree to this eventually, and we did. This is a great article to bring out right before the Seattle Seahawks faced the Denver Broncos on Monday Night Football. So I have this question to ask you guys. How do you feel about this? I mean, if you're a Seattle Seahawks fan, do you believe that Russell Wilson's ability was declining? Do you think this was the right move? Or do you think you should have held on to the most successful quarterback in your franchise's history? Are you content with the return that you got in the Russell Wilson trade? Do you think this was the appropriate time to tank and potentially take CJ Stroud or Bryce Young in next year's NFL draft? I'd like to hear what you have to say. Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike, and I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.